I have this thing where if a bird doesn't produce, I'll leave them in a certain aviary for like 3 years.
Yes.
If they don't produce, I'll move them. If they produce, that's where they stay until they quit producing, then I'll mix them up a little bit. Couple parts of this. We tend to, a lot of surface feeding ducks, people will say, oh, they breed in 1 year. Which a lot of them do breed in 1 year. But there's also some that won't breed in 1 year for whatever reason, whether they're hatched out in, late hatch in July or early August or whatever, so not quite reach sexual maturity by, March of the following year, March, April of the following year. I'll move birds, after 3 years I'll move birds. But I've also got it in my mind that sometimes these birds will take longer than, if they say years, some of them will actually take 3 years or 4 years. They may not kick in.
They can't click like you want them to.
Yeah.
Is what it amounts to.
And we find also that even though a shoveler duck, or that's a bad example because they're not a really freely breeding bird, something like a cinnamon teal, where it may not produce well the first year, may not produce well the second year, but third, fourth year they start picking up.
Right.
Hottentot teals are great. You said you had Hottentot teals. We've had them lay as early as 9 months. But typically they don't lay for at least 1 year, and they don't get going until, most of them until 2 or 3 years old.
Well, I've had bleeding hearts lay at 11 and 12 months, but those same birds are not going to be decent parents until they're at least 24 months.
Because they need practice.
Practice, and it's going to be failure, but eventually they'll click, and they're going to breed for the next 20 years.
So we were talking about, with these, like you mentioned something about using foster parents.
Yes.
You had a friend that was using, do you ever do that with these bleeding heart dogs?
Oh yes, in fact I just posted a note many years ago because someone showed my friend J.J. Ramirez from Puerto Rico. He posted a picture of a flight, presumably in Puerto Rico. There must have been 10 or 12 bleeding hearts walking on the floor. Beautiful.
Yeah, I saw that picture. Yeah.
And I commented that many years ago I broke my own record of producing 26 Luzons in one season and about, 7 or 8 Bartletts the same season, but I did it only because I fostered the eggs to ringneck doves. I had some very reliable parents, and today, if you're able to do that and you have the right parents, you can quadruple the number of birds because these birds will lay eggs
It's like Virgil and Mickey down in Florida.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing with these crown pigeons.
I think,
they're pulling them.
they're pulling them and hand raising.
Right, hand raising them, but it's allowing the birds
the birds will relay right away. My first pair of crown pigeons, the hen laid 19 fertile eggs in 1 year.
Yeah.
That's more than 1 egg a month, and I only raised 1 baby because that's the only egg she would sit on and feed.
So you wouldn't feed them?
No, well we tried, but hand feeding a pigeon 20 years ago from day one.
Yeah, that's a different story.
So I got,
What are these up here, Gary?
those are called lemon doves.
Lemon doves.
They come from South Africa. They were imported a few years ago for the first time in many, many years, and oddly enough, the South African lemon doves are incredibly colorful. The Western African lemon doves are dull as get out. No color whatsoever. Those were available in the 80s, and they quickly disappeared because they weren't pretty enough. People didn't want them. These are real pretty, and people are very fond of them. I have 4 birds, and they occasionally breed. I'm not trying to breed that anymore.
Is there more other people breeding them now?
Oh yeah, quite a few people.
What is this tarp you got here? This
Well, actually, I was telling you one of this earlier. I put this on every cage because it will prevent most birds from flying directly at me when I walk into it. It could even be longer if I needed it to be, but it prevents diamond doves and green-winged doves from flying directly at me, which they're very prone to do.
It covers your face?
It covers my face, is what it amounts to. And I tell people, as I mentioned earlier, that if you want to prevent birds from getting out of a single aviary, break something all the way down that you walk through or walk around, it'll stop.
Like a double door. We got some aviaries with chains hanging. That way they don't, they kind of avoid the chains. And
There are some individual birds that are so savvy of doors opening that they will wait for you to open it so they can attempt to get out. Routinely, over and over. So I just put that up. But anyway.
so do you have nets on this Aviary? So do you have nets on them?
Well, I keep them down in the middle room. Yes, I have nets. But fortunately, not much ever gets out. No, not anymore. Well, I got a great inbreeding story for you, because I knew this would ruffle the feathers of my zebra finch friends. I got out of zebra finches about 15 years ago. That had been my mainstay for decades, breeding rare zebra finches. I imported a lot of stuff from Europe for the first time, and one of my favorite zebra finches of all time were black-breasted zebras. I can honestly say that for probably 10 years, I would look at pictures of black-breasted zebra finches that were only in Europe and drool for the day that I would see them in the flesh. So finally in 1982, I got them. And I bred them, and it's pretty common today. So when I got out of zebra finches, I kept a small handful of black-breasteds. And like 7 or 8 birds. And I decided, well, I'm going to give these to my friend Sue in Florida. Sue's got big aviaries. I gave her those 7 or 8 black-breasted zebra finches. And 3 years later, she said, Garrie, can't do it anymore. You got to come get these birds. I went and I picked up over 180 black-breasted zebra finches from those 7 or 8 birds. And they said, what about inbreeding? Well, I have 180 to show for it. Where's the inbreeding problem?
Yeah.
Come on. They're so paranoid about inbreeding. Look what happened. So I did the same thing. I actually bought several pair of orange-breasted zebras and I gave them to Sue. And I went back 2 years later and I got 150 orange-breasted zebra finches from her.
That's like we were talking at lunchtime. This whole inbreeding thing, you got to take it by species by species.
Oh yeah.
Even though there may very well be some species, and the thing is, inbreeding doesn't necessarily just have to affect fertility. It can affect feather quality. It can affect size of the bird. It can affect behavior,
many
physiology. Yeah, it can affect so many things.
I often point this bird out.
How many generations of inbreeding of those things?
Oh my God! Look. There haven't been wild button quail coming into aviculture in countless decades, literally. Mm-hmm. They're all descended from whatever was imported into Europe, back in the 20s or 30s.
And there's no reason to bring in more because they're still producing. That's why nobody's bringing in more.
So I mean, when people say I want to make sure I get unrelated pairs, of what importance is that with a bird like this?
That's actually one of my kind of, I don't know, not a pet peeve, but this baffles me is, like, there's a few well-known, say for example, like Garrie brought in, bleeding heart doves. Bartlett's breeding heart doves, right?
Yeah.
And everybody else has got bleeding heart doves, but they're like, oh yeah, but they're inbred or whatever, or they're crossbred, whatever it is. They're not high-quality birds for whatever reason. But then people get in their mind, well, Garrie's got the best because he brought them in. Before you know it, you got everybody buying from Garrie, and nobody's buying them from Joe Smo down the road, who has equally the same birds.
Absolutely.
But then what happens is, because everybody's buying them from Garrie, guess what? They've got the same bloodline. Everybody's got the same bloodline because Garrie's got the best birds, so we buy Garrie's birds.
It's a train of thought that is difficult to break the cycle of. Mm-hmm. They would do anything to avoid their concept of practicing inbreeding, yet they don't realize how that can actually be an advantage if you do it properly.
But again, like I said, especially nowadays, we have limited new birds coming in. You're going to make a decision whether you want the birds to exist in captivity, or you want inbred bird. You want inbred birds and they exist in captivity, or
that's a copperneck dove right there. Oh, I guess he just flew back. Well, we were talking about these bar shoulders where I had the only ones breeding back in the 80s. Well, it didn't take long, another 20 years, 90s or 2000s, that they became rare again. And I think birds like that, to some extent, were prone to inbreeding issues. And I can't explain why, but some species are more so than others.
But, you know, again, my whole thing is, especially in this day and age, we need to make a choice. You know, do we want the birds to disappear?
Oh, yeah.
Or are we going to accept inbreeding as the new normal?
Well,
And if we want to continue this, we're going to have to accept in a lot of cases inbreeding, whether it's harmful or not to the birds, because it's the best and the only thing we can have at this point.
my only one point I see he's singing right now.
Yep.
Calling. Do you know Frank Trump from California?
I've spoken to him before listening to the internet.
He made a big effort. He might regret it now, but he brought in a lot of captive exotic doves from South Africa from someone's collection. And in that collection were a bunch of bar shoulder doves. So I immediately bought as many as he would sell me because I knew they would be completely unrelated to anything we had in the U.S. And you couldn't go wrong with that kind of combination. And I'm glad I did because they're breeding very well again. The only problem with them is that they're so damn mean, you got to keep each bird a separate aviary until you're ready to pair it up.
But then another problem is you need to make sure that as many people as possible are breeding them.
Oh yeah.
Even if you think it might have an economic impact on your business, because 5 years online you might be looking for something.
Oh, no.
Nobody,
Absolutely.
If nobody's bred anything, then
Right. Well, I that's one bird that I try to push as much as I can. You know?
yeah, and, you know, it gets back to. I mean, a lot of these. I'm not going to get back on our lunchtime conversation, but you know, a lot of these birds, people don't tend to think about the long-term impacts of not promoting, you know, a lot of these things and encouraging people to breed them, even if it does become potential competitor.
Yeah.
Because the problem is, if you don't create potential competitors, 5 years online, you know, your breeding fund is going to quit, and you may be looking for more.